Welcome! In the first half of 2025, China's auto industry didn't just evolve, it fractured. Our analysis shows what we're calling the Great Divergence, a deep and accelerating split between the market's winners and its losers.
So, what's our main thesis here? It all boils down to this one core idea of the Great Divergence. And let's be clear, this isn't just some cyclical downturn for some players. It's a fundamental, structural break in the entire industry.
Here's how we'll break it down today. We'll start by laying out the evidence for this great divergence. Then, we'll follow the money in a financial deep dive, look at who's winning and losing in cars and trucks, and finally, we'll scan the horizon for the next big strategic battlefields.
Okay, let's get into it. And we start with a paradox. The overall sales numbers look pretty healthy, but they're masking a brutal reality just beneath the surface, a reality of fierce competition and a massive transfer of market share. At first glance, the market seems really robust. You see a number like 11.4% growth in total vehicle sales. That lines up almost perfectly with the revenue growth of the car makers, which suggests, everything's stable.
But that stability, it's an illusion. It's really the result of two powerful opposing forces canceling each other out. On one hand, you have aggressive price cuts on older models, and on the other, a huge consumer upgrade to more expensive feature-packed new energy vehicles. The lesson here is that winning isn't about volume anymore, it's about leading that upgrade.
And you can see this divergence crystal clear in the data. When you break it down by who owns the company, the private NEV-focused firms are capturing all of the market growth, expanding revenue by a whopping 23%. Meanwhile, the state-owned companies are flat, and international brands are actually shrinking. Now, let's slice it another way, by technology. The picture gets even sharper. The NEV-centric players saw revenues jump 25%. The traditional guys? Zero growth. This isn't a market shift. It's a permanent transfer of power. Okay, so this split goes way deeper than just sales numbers. It hits the bottom line hard. In this section, we're going to look at not just who's making money, but where that profit really comes from. And spoiler alert, it's not just on the income statement anymore. The gross margin data tells a really stark story about pricing power. NEV leaders are pulling in a 20% margin, which shows just how profitable they are. Now compare that to international brands at 13% and the state-owned enterprises at just 8%. You can see who's being forced to sacrifice their margins just to compete. But profits are only part of the story. Maybe the most profound insight from this whole period isn't in the reported earnings, but in who has mastered the balance sheet and who has turned their supply chain into a weapon. This is where you see the real power dynamic. Consider this number, 112 days. That's how long, on average, the leading NEV companies take to pay their suppliers. It's a direct measure of just how dominant they've become. The contrast here is just stunning. The leaders are collecting cash from their customers in just 19 days, but they're waiting over 100 days to pay their own bills. International brands, they're facing the exact opposite situation. This difference in the cash cycle has become an incredibly powerful competitive weapon. And what this creates is a powerful advantage we call the zero-cost bank. Essentially, the market leaders are using their supply chains as a source of free financing. They're holding on to their suppliers' cash to fund their own R&D and expansion. This is an invisible, structural moat that is incredibly difficult for anyone else to copy.
All right, so let's take this whole framework and apply it to the main event, the passenger vehicle market. Because here, this divergence has created a brand new and very clear pecking order.
The data shows a clear three-tiered market. You've got your winners, like BYD and Xiaomi, who have both strong growth and high margins. Then you have the challengers, like Geely. They're growing, but not as profitably. And then you have the laggards, mostly the traditional state-owned companies who are really losing ground. Some are even operating at a loss.
This whole shakeup has been particularly rough for the international brands. Their combined market share has just collapsed, falling from over 60% a few years ago to around 31% today. And again, this looks structural, not cyclical.
For some, the situation is pretty severe. Take Mercedes-Benz. They saw a dramatic 19% drop in sales in the second quarter alone, and that was a huge reason the company had to issue a global profit warning. And even Tesla, the original EV disruptor, isn't immune. The company actually saw its revenue in China fall by 11% in the first half.
They're feeling the pressure from an aging product lineup and just fierce competition from all the new local models.
Okay, let's switch gears and look at the commercial vehicle market. Because over here, we're seeing a totally different story. It's not about disruption. It's about a more classic, cyclical recovery. You see, in commercial vehicles, electrification is playing out differently. It's driven by pure economics, not consumer trends. For big trucks and buses, the lower total cost of ownership for an EV just makes financial sense. And this dynamic actually helps the established leaders, like Yutong Bus, who can use their massive scale to lead this transition.
So, finally, let's look ahead. Our analysis points to 3 key strategic areas that are really going to define the next phase of competition in this industry.
3 big battlegrounds are going to shape the future. First, the race for autonomous driving, where Level 2+ systems are quickly becoming standard. Second is the continued dominance in battery tech. China's 77% share of global capacity is a massive structural advantage. And third is globalization, as Chinese brands push aggressively into export markets like Europe.
So, to sum it all up, the industry is really entering a tougher new phase. The game is shifting away from a battle for pure growth to a battle for survival. And because of that, we think more market consolidation is pretty much inevitable.
Which leaves us with one final big strategic question. As all these powerful forces, technology, capital, supply chain dominance all converge, what does the end game for this industry look like? Is it going to consolidate into a stable oligopoly run by a few giants? Or will the pace of innovation keep the door open for new disruptors? That really remains the key question for the years ahead.